after Richard should have himself returned from the crusade. These things being all thus arranged, Philip began to make his preparations openly for embarking on his voyage home. The knights and barons, and indeed the whole body of the army, considered Philip's leaving them as a very culpable abandonment of the enterprise, and they crowded around the place of embarkation when he went on board his vessel, and manifested their displeasure with ill-suppressed hisses and groans. The time which had been fixed upon for Saladin to comply with the stipulations of the surrender was 40 days, and this period was now, after Philip had gone, drawing rapidly to a close. Saladin found that he could not fulfil the conditions to which he had agreed. As the day approached, he made various excuses and apologies to Richard, and he also sent him a number of costly presents, hoping perhaps in that way to propitiate his favour and prevent his insisting on the execution of the dreadful penalty which had been agreed upon in case of default, namely the slaughter of the 5,000 hostages which had been left in his hands. The time at last expired, and the treaty had not been fulfilled. Richard, without waiting even a day, determined that the hostages should be slain. A rumour was set in circulation that Saladin had put to death all his Christian prisoners. This rumour was false, but it served its purpose of exasperating the minds of the Crusaders, so as to bring the soldiers up well to the necessary pitch of ferocity for executing so terrible a work. The slaughter of 5,000 defenceless and unresisting men in cold blood is very hard work for even soldiers to perform, and if such a work is to be done, it is always necessary to contrive some means of heating the blood of the executioners in order to ensure the accomplishment of it. In this case, the rumour that Saladin had murdered his Christian prisoners was more than sufficient. It wrought up the allied army to such a frenzy that the soldiers assembled in crowds and riotously demanded that the Saracen prisoners should be given up to them in order that they might have their revenge. Accordingly, at the appointed time, Richard gave the command, and the whole body of the prisoners was brought out and conducted to the plain beyond the lines of the camp. A few were reserved. These were persons of rank and consideration, who were to be saved in the hopes that they might have wealthy friends at home, who would pay money to ransom them. The rest were divided into 2 portions, one of which was committed to the charge of the Duke of Burgundy, and the other Richard led himself. The dreadful processions formed by these wretched men were followed by the excited soldiery that were to act as their executioners, who came crowding on in throngs, waving their swords and filling the air with their ferocious threats and imprecations, and exulting in the prospect of having absolutely their fill of the pleasure of killing men without any danger to themselves to mar the enjoyment of it. The massacre was carried into effect in the fullest possible manner, and after the men were killed, the Christians occupied themselves in cutting open their bodies to find jewels and other articles of value, which they pretended that the poor captives had swallowed in order to hide them from their enemies. Instead of being ashamed of this deed, Richard gloried in it. He considered it a wonderful proof of his zeal for the cause of Christ. The writers of the time praised it. The Saracens, they maintained, were the enemies of God, and whoever slew them did God service. One of the historians of the time says that angels from heaven appeared to Richard at the time, and urged him to persevere to the end, crying aloud to him while the massacre was going on, "Kill, kill, spare them not." It seems to us, at the present day, most amazing that the minds of men could possibly be so perverted as to think that in performing such deeds as this, they were sustaining the cause of the meek and gentle Jesus of Nazareth, and were the objects of approval and favour with God, the common Father of us all, who has declared that he has made of one blood all the nations of the earth, to live together in peace and unity. End of chapter 14.